Well, it's time now to take a look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. Flo is here to do that with me. Hi, Flo. And we've got lots of focus on President Emmanuel Macron this morning. Yesterday, he spoke to 200 ambassadors about his foreign policy vision.
He spelled out his vision for foreign policy and what to expect over the next 5 years. Le Figaro actually applauds the fact that Macron was very clear on one point. You can see it here. Macron essentially declared Islamist terrorism France's #1 enemy, the #1 target. Now, he did outline other priorities that he has in mind. For instance, the European Union and strengthening the Eurozone is also on his list of things to do. And also, one thing that he really went into detail about was helping Africa develop, because that will, in return, help Europe.
And if we're speaking about Islamist terrorism and jihadists, Le Figaro applauds Macron, doesn't it, for clearly identifying that threat, unlike his predecessors.
That's right. Le Figaro says that Macron's predecessors weren't clear enough on this issue, while Macron had the courage to call a spade a spade. To fight our enemy effectively, we must first identify it. That's what Le Figaro says in its editorial. You can see in the title there, it applauds what it calls the diplomacy of, well, fighting diplomacy, the diplomacy of combat. But what's interesting is Le Monde has a different take on his speech. It's not so much the diplomacy of fighting, it's a protective diplomacy. That's what Emmanuel Macron was eager to outline yesterday, according to Le Monde, by getting more involved in regions, for instance, in Syria, Iraq, Libya, the Sahel region. France is essentially signaling that it wants to get back in the game. It wants to get back in the diplomatic game. Now, according to Macron, stabilizing these regions is key to fighting jihadism, as is shining the light on all the ways that terrorism is financed.
Now, Macron is quite keen to show himself as paving a new way on the diplomatic front. But, Flo, you found some critics who say that actually there's nothing really new about it.
L'Humanité, the Communist paper, not a huge fan of Emmanuel Macron. They say that it's same old, nothing new under the sun. Now, during his speech yesterday, Macron essentially followed in the footsteps of his predecessors, got in line, if you will, according to L'Humanité. You can see, according to L'Humanité, the Communist paper, Macron and his predecessors, in their view, diplomacy is at the service of the economy. And you can see that they have a very different take on that speech. Once again, they say that he made it clear that one of his priorities, according to them, is actually to fight against immigration. So apparently they weren't hearing the same thing.
Well, let's move on to the economy now. And Libération has a special report on the amount of dividends that are paid to France's top companies.
Well, it's quite staggering, according to Libération. 40 billion euros, in fact. That's the amount of money that was distributed to the stockholders of companies on France's CAC 40, so the benchmark stock market index, and this for the second trimester, so 40 billion euros. This is a European record, and it's actually equivalent to a pre-crisis level. So you can see this in-depth analysis here in Libération, and Libération is critical in its editorial of what it calls the theory of the trickle-down effect. This is the theory that if the people at the top earn a lot of money, well, it'll trickle down to those at the bottom, and this has justified all sorts of tax breaks, all sorts of free market economics here in France. But in its editorial, Libération says that clearly this trickle-down effect doesn't work. It's actually a trickle-up effect driven by avidité, greed. So it really doesn't mince its words here. It says that the powerful class is just greedy by imposing this trickle-down effect. It's actually a triple-up effect that is in fact bad for workers and investment, and in the long run leads to a rise in populism.
We're going to stay with Libération because that paper has published an interview with German Chancellor Angela Merkel that she did with a German paper.
It's an interesting partnership between Libération and a German daily called the Die Tageszeitung. Now, they teamed up for the French elections, and they're at it again in the lead up to the German election, which will take place on September 24th. Now, with less than a month to go, Angela Merkel looks like she's well on track to be about to win a new term, a fourth term, and in this interview, she outlines the main points of her program, particularly regarding the migrant crisis, regarding her views on the environment, etc. And you can see this quote here from that interview where she says, "What's important to me is to give a human form to globalization." Once again, these issues of globalization taking up a lot of room in elections.
And Catholic paper La Croix has been a little bit more critical of that German model. It's been focusing on those people who've been left behind.
It's an interesting analysis as well. If we take a look at the front page of La Croix here, you can see they're talking about those who are forgotten, left behind by the German economy. Now, La Croix takes a look at the track record, I guess you could say, of the Merkel years, what's happened to Germany ever since Angela Merkel has been in power. And it says that, look, Germany has had very good economic results. You can't hide that. That's true. But there are still some darker sides to that success story, I guess you can say, and that's what La Croix is focusing on. It says that in one thing in particular is that Merkel is running a country where over 900,000 retired people are forced to actually go back to work because they can't make ends meet on their pension, so they have to go back and work.
Gosh. And finally, we're going to have a word on football, just to lift the spirits a bit. It's been a summer of record-breaking transfers. And of course, at the heart of that has been France.
It's been the story of the summer, hasn't it? Football transfers, records. You can see here on the front page of Le Figaro, you can see that photo of a football player. That's Kylian Mbappé. Now, France essentially has been at the heart of a global overbidding trend. That's what Le Figaro calls it, kind of one-upsmanship. It all started with the transfer of Neymar Jr., so a 222 million euro transfer to Paris Saint-Germain, a world record. Well, Kylian Mbappé, the guy in the photo there, he has also broken a new record with his 180 million transfer once again to Paris Saint-Germain. He has become France's most expensive player. Now, this is, of course, a story that we've been following all summer, and I really enjoyed a cartoon in Libération. This is by Willem, where he takes a funny look at this. You can see all these stereotypical fat cat bankers, millionaires, I guess you could say, the stereotypical monopoly figure, I guess you could say, playing football here with their cigars and smoking their glasses of champagne. Meanwhile, you can see those people rooting them on, saying, look, soccer players might be millionaires, but football will always be football.
I'd love to see them dressing like that on the pitch. That would be fantastic. Flo with the French Press Review. And still to come on the programme, the capital city that's undergoing an enormous transformation. New infrastructure and green spaces. But do its 12 million inhabitants approve? Find out in Focus later on the programme.